We recently had the 11-year anniversary of the earthquake in Japan. So just to refresh the
I
audience,
was gonna ask you a little bit about Japan, so
yeah,
here we go.
kind of refresh the audience on it because it's a different way of thinking, and it's an example of having um, the dexterity,
Mhm.
conceptually, mentally, in terms of how do you come up with solutions. So on March 11th, 2011, we're witness in Pearl Harbor to a lot of seismograph activity. We think there's a problem with the technology.
And what were you doing in the Navy at that time?
Command of the Pacific Fleet
Okay.
in Pearl Harbor. Um, so we think there's a problem with the technology because anything over an 8.3 magnitude earthquake in Japan is a 1,000-year event. So this is 9.1. 9.1 affects the tilt of the Earth's axis.
Mm-hmm.
It moves Japan physically 7 feet. It drops the coastline by more than a meter. And because Japan is the most instrumented country in the world, we know exactly where and when and what happened. So it's about 65 miles off the coast of Sendai at a depth of 22,000 feet. You have the Eurasian plate and the Pacific plate have been pushing up against each other for hundreds of years. All that energy gets released on March 11th, and it displaces 10 billion tons of water. It's moving at the speed of a jet, and it hits Sendai at 133 feet, and it goes all the way 6.5 miles inland. And then it's like an egg beater. It sort of pulls everything within its reach back out to sea. Fukushima loses primary, secondary, and tertiary power at that point. And then we have the core meltdown in buildings 1, 2, and 3, and the resultant hydrogen release and explosion. So we are arriving on scene with a radioactive plume that has now gone into the ground, into the groundwater supply and the food supply, and it's getting tracked all around Japan. Next to each nuclear power plant, each of the 6, is a spent fuel pond, which is where these rods go after they've been used for the next several thousand years,
Mm-hmm.
requiring cool, circulating fresh water in order to keep them from cooking off. So, so when we arrive, we're contemplating the evacuation of Japan. That's how serious a problem that we've got.
And I don't think people understood it was that bad.
It was pretty bad. Um, what complicates it are the 1,500 aftershocks, averaging 7.5.
Good.
So
1,500 aftershocks, averaging
Right.
7.5.
when we are dealing with a humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operation, so we are trying to get on our feet quickly to understand, not only what has happened, but what's going to happen. The mark of leadership to be able to anticipate, what the next move is, and trying to position forces and apportion assets so that you're ready in anticipation of what happens next. Well, what happens next is happening like all the time. So we land, and it becomes pretty clear right away that the traditional sort of approach, and this is really where you're getting at,
Yes.
which is hierarchical, and it's vertical in its orientation, organizationally. In other words, it starts with authorities and then resources and senior subordinate relationships. And you live kind of in this sort of column. Um, and as a result, what happens is that um, you're not going to deal with the expanse. You're not going to deal with the whole problem the way it needs to be dealt with. So instead of thinking vertically, we had to think horizontally. So instead of building for command and control and unity of command, we built an organization called a Joint Support Force that was really built for unity of effort and transparency. So that is 49 international NGOs. That's the U.S. Agency for International Development. That's all the ministries in Japan, as well as the Self-Defense Force and the U.S. forces. And that was called Operation Tomodachi, which means friend. So when we landed, the first thing that we needed to understand is what was going on in the reactor. And what we ended up doing was building a reactor on a whiteboard. So trying to understand, okay, what readings do we have? What readings do we need to understand like what the core is doing and where it's going? These are a bunch of English majors, okay, that are trying to come up with this. No offense, you're a humanities guy, right?
Humanities, history. Either way, I wouldn't
Oh,
take
like
offense
that.
to it.
Okay,
Exactly.
so,
Hey, I'm a grunt. I get it. That's no offense taken.
but that's what we ended up doing. And you're right. There's no way that we could walk into a triple disaster of a earthquake that size and a tsunami that big and a radiation release, a triple disaster that is the worst, causes the worst destruction in Japan since World War II. Their words, not ours. So 400,000 homes destroyed, 20,000 lives lost. I mean, it's huge. And we're taking risk on behalf of the Japanese people. They see that. They see us shoulder to shoulder with the self-defense force out there in an exposed environment, trying to get our arms around this the best way we could. To go about it the traditional way, that top-down, heavy-handed management approach wasn't going to work. We needed the best solution that the world could offer. A statement in and of itself is a problem statement that says it's a self-confession. I don't have the mental means in order to get my head wrapped around how big a problem this is. I need help, and I'm not going to turn anybody down that can help us. And I think that's one thing that's different. What I notice in the private sector is that, particularly on the entrepreneurial side, they'll make decisions based on gut because they've been living with a certain amount of risk,
Mm-hmm.
and where they want to take risk, they'll take risk, and where they see risk has no return for them, they'll make a decision quickly, and that usually involves people. So we come from a different model, a deployed model, meaning that if you got a person that's cutting up and having a hard time sort of fitting in, there's no replacement for that person, and there's no place for that person to go except back to work. So that means that you have to come up with some means of use of the Old Testament and New Testament in order to figure out what is the tailored solution to this guy's problem so he can be returned and contributing to the team. That's one of the benefits of being like in uniform and in command. One personality can have a big impact on an organization and on a team.
Positively and negatively.
Right, by the way they lead.